Cypress Development Corp. is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp. trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
Green Party leader Elizabeth May proudly proclaims oil is dead. Does she expect to gain any votes, do you think, anytime soon in Alberta or Saskatchewan or even in northeastern BC where oil and gas are part of the economy?
Well, it doesn't matter to her. She's a lame duck. She's not running again for office, so she's just, delivering the party ideology. It's completely mythical, fanciful. Her statement, oil is dead. Oil's not dead. It may never be dead. I think it's impossible to imagine humanity without the products made from these hydrocarbons, because they're everywhere in how we live. And it's even as we take them out of the energy system over time, and it will take a very, very long time, many decades to do that, we're still looking at uses, whether it's in the clothes we wear, in things we eat and drink, just everywhere in life, you've got them. So oil's definitely not dead, but Elizabeth May's political career is dead because she's leaving politics, and I guess this is something she can say on the way out without any harm for her electoral chances, because I think the average person looking around at what they do every day probably has a sneaking suspicion that it's really more of a political slogan aimed at a niche audience for Elizabeth May than it is any sort of statement about reality. Let me tell you, Jim, Elizabeth May has her riding is Saanich Gulf Island, so it's right to the left side of the Strait of Georgia as you look at the map, just north of Victoria. Last Monday, in spite of her pronouncement that oil is dead, I noticed there was a tanker. It was a crude oil tanker. It was at the West Shore Terminal in Burnaby, which is where the Trans Mountain Pipeline comes out. And typically ships there will come in and come and tie up, and they will fill up with the products coming out of that pipeline, and then they will be on their way. But I just felt it was a little ironic. Only a few days after this ship takes on a load of crude oil and goes off to market, goes off across the Pacific to markets, it went right through the boundary of her riding, and I suspect she hasn't a clue. And this stuff happens under our noses. It's kind of innocuous, it's another ship. There's so many ships that pass down through there every day. Unless you really knew what you were looking at, you wouldn't know the difference. Yet there it is, right under our noses. And I think that's the nature of energy. We take it for granted. We don't even notice the reliance we have on things. But it's absolutely pervasive.
How does Elizabeth May get between the Gulf Islands and Ottawa? Does she walk? Does she ride a bike? Does she take a dog sled? Does she rollerblade? Does she take a foot scooter? How does she get there?
Interesting speculation on her transportation choices, Jim. But let me tell you, I can personally attest that I was in the Ottawa airport coming back west after there, and I was delighted to see there was Elizabeth May and her, I guess, assistant traveling through. I happened to be up in the Maple Leaf Lounge, where frequent flyers go, and there was she, enjoying some lovely wine. And I'm pretty sure that she was not thereupon embarking on a journey across country by scooter. I think she was at the airport to get on a plane. I don't know what plane she got on, but on that occasion at least, she definitely was there ready to do the things that people do when they're at aircraft terminals.
But, her airplane was powered by sunshine and rainbows.
Very effective things to power airplanes with in an alternative universe that we don't inhabit. But otherwise, yeah, one of the ironies about this latest crusade by the Green Party against the thing that literally pays the rent. I mean, it's the trade surplus from our sales of Canadian crude oil that allow us to, I guess not literally, but figuratively pay the rent as a country, because it generates an enormous trade surplus that allows us, in turn, to be able to have the financial strength to purchase the things that we need, but we can't make ourselves. You know, we don't grow bananas or oranges or all kinds of foodstuffs. We don't make half as much of the vaccines and blood serum products and things like that we need to be healthy. You know, we don't make BMW cars, but people want them and get them, and all sorts of other stuff, iPhones and what have you. We just don't make them here. You could never replace all of that. And having these exports of crude oil let that happen. You never see that come into the talking points when you have these rambling attacks against the workers in Canadian energy. You just have, oil's got some negatives. Well, sure, it has some negatives. We know that, and we're on it. Canadians have accepted carbon taxes and all sorts of regulations. We've accepted that. That's in the past. We're doing it now. And, that's, I think something that's often lost. And, the trade picture right now is clearly depressed, but for everything. On the logic of saying oil is dead because it's down a bit right now, you should also be saying that tourism is dead and will never come back. You should also be saying that pubs and restaurants are dead and will never come back. If your sole basis for the argument is that they are, because of COVID, in a state of great decline.
Yes, we'll never get our hair cut again. We'll never get our toenails trimmed again.
It's dead. Barbers are dead. Yeah. Now I'm looking forward. I've marked a date on my calendar, May 19th. Do you know what that date stands for, Jim? May
Day. I don't know.
May Day. No, it's a day that the pubs are reopening. That's what Premier Horgan said last week. Pubs. Now I guess it's up to individual pubs and maybe some final health clearance, but that's coming close. That's next Tuesday. And I would definitely like to be at a pub there to celebrate the return of part of our great way of life. So we'll see.
With the Bloc Québécois as well, echoing her comments that oil is dead, it has no place for us. You were the one who told me nobody buys more SUVs in Canada than Quebecers.
Oh yeah, they love their SUVs. They love their winter holidays. They go down to the Caribbean. There's so many Quebecers. They're known around the Caribbean as the Tabernacs, because they're often heard to say Tabernac.
Moodsie Tabernac. Yeah.
That's a bad word. I don't think I could say that on the radio in Quebec. People might be offended, but it's what the islanders of the Caribbean say when they see Quebec coming, because they can fly down there in these planes that consume fuel. Maybe they're Bombardiers. But more likely Boeings or Airbuses, because they need to be big to get so many. There's a lot of Quebecers down in Florida and around the Caribbean at this time of year. And, I don't think that the Bloc Québécois leader speaks for that many Quebecers, certainly not on these issues. It's playing divisive separatist politics. It's a separatist party. Its raison d'etre is to split Canada up, and they don't just care about Quebec separation, Alberta separation. Why not? If we can hive off Quebec by confusing and turning people against each other, hey, that's more success for the separatist cause. So it's very strange bedfellows, the separatist party and the Greens, but each one with its differing agenda seems more than willing to sacrifice any principle they might have as Canadian MPs to do this, which is rather a sad and I would say a pathetic situation. But it's politics.
When MPs are sworn in, even if they're from Quebec, don't they have to swear allegiance to the Queen?
Do they? Well, you think so in theory, but I can't imagine that being imposed on them. Certainly not in this day and age. It would just be, hey, do what you want to do. Isn't that right? I don't know.
I think they're standing there.
Let's fact check that. Let's look it up for next week, because it is a good question. There ought to be allegiance. Maybe it could be, hey, you don't want to swear allegiance? We'll tell you what, you can do the job, and and get paid in a foreign currency of your choice. You go and find that. Meanwhile, the taxpayers of Canada will just hold on to their bills with the, Queen's picture on them, and you can get your money from somewhere else. How about that?
I have yet to see Quebec refuse a transfer payment, most of it being money generated by Alberta's oil.
Well, here's what I proposed. When Blanchet came out with his attack on the West, I said, hey, where your mouth is, for Parliament, you can, it's a private member's bill, you don't have to be in government to do this, to say Quebec will, in order to put its money where its mouth is, we don't just hate Western oil, we also hate all the revenues that come to Quebec and all the other benefits that come to Quebec because of that thing we hate. So as of this day forward, once this law is passed, and I'm sure lots of people in, seats held all over the country would vote in favor of it, they could truly be congruent in their words and actions by swearing off these revenues. And then the revenues where they are needed and appreciated could be put to better use instead of, spent in a place that it would seem is willing to send a lot of MPs to Parliament to destroy the country.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, could the quickest way for Western Canadian oil to make its way to Eastern Canada be the Panama Canal?
Well, who would have thought that until only a few days ago? Who would have dreamed that getting Alberta oil through a pipeline, or maybe on rail, or who knows, on trucks, I don't know, to the coast, the west coast, on the Pacific, put it in a tanker, that tanker going down to the Panama Canal, crossing the canal, coming up into the Gulf of Mexico, and then up and around all the way to the Eastern Seaboard's biggest refinery, which is the Irving Refinery in St. John, New Brunswick. Who would have thought that this would be the way that Alberta oil gets to be used by a Canadian refinery on the Atlantic Ocean? But that's what's being proposed. So just a couple of weeks ago, we learned about a proposal by the Irving people to find a number of ships that would allow this to happen. The ships have to be of a certain size, no wider than the Panama Canal itself. They're called the Panamax tankers. They're a smaller tanker. They're not your big honkin' super tankers. These are the little guys. I think it's up to about 500,000 barrels of oil. That might sound like a lot of barrels to George and Martha at home, but it's kind of rinky-dink. Not rinky-dink. It's smaller.
Those are the size of tankers. Yeah, those are the size of tankers that could squeeze underneath Lionsgate Bridge in Vancouver.
Yeah, those are Aframax, and those are bigger. So up to something like 850, up towards a million barrels can go through there. Now I understand that because of the height of the bridge, they don't load them all the way, so there's a bit of inefficiency there. But these Panamax ones that are being proposed are a little smaller, but still, you think, 500,000 barrels, and say, for the sake of argument, oil is going to get up to, $30-40 pretty soon again. So do the math there. That's $10-20 million cargo that you're talking about. So probably it's going to bear some transportation costs that will still allow it to be a viable thing. And once again, we can see that the thesis of Elizabeth May that oil is dead, or the Canadian oil she dislikes is dead, that is, is really a flimsy thesis, because it is economically viable to both produce and market and use the oil found in our Western Sedimentary Basin here in Canada. Whether this will happen, well, I think now that the company has come out and said, the Irving company has said they've worked with some companies in the oil sands who like the idea and they'd like to, find that market. It's a way of ensuring that the refinery has got a good mix of oil. There's a lot of, we hear mainly about the heavy oil from the oil sands, but truth is Canada produces quite a lot of medium oil, and the people in New Brunswick at the refinery, they actually import some heavy oil. They import it from overseas, from Côte d'Ivoire. They get quite a lot from there, and other countries, because they can mix it in the refinery. Don't ask me about the details of how they blend things going in. It's an incredibly technical process, but I do know that the import statistics confirm the fact that we do import some heavy oil to the East Coast, specifically to the Port of St. John, probably $500 million worth last year. So just imagine that we got some of that heavy oil from here. That would be good. And then some of that medium oil that the refinery is tooled up to use. We got lots of that in the West, so we could get that on ships too. Let me say one more thing, Jim. If we had a pipeline like Energy East, which was killed by the Trudeau government for reasons that have never really been disclosed, if we had that now, it would be a lot simpler to get that oil to market, and it would be done in a way that was environmentally responsible. You wouldn't need to burn fuel in ships to do it. It would be greener, therefore. So, over the longer term future, we might give thought to how the political obstacles that come up to any new pipeline proposal can be dealt with, because it does mean a lot for our quality of life, having the money to pay for stuff. This COVID closure, man, that's going to be something we pay for a long time. And, it's not free money. I know people getting $2,000 in the mail. I'm lucky. I feel lucky we live in a country where we can afford that. But at the same time, life has taught me that when you get something for free, well, it's not really for free. So we're going to have to pay for that somehow.
Do you know how much oil Canada imports every year when it could be using Canadian oil?
Yeah, I would say just medium oil. There's probably $18 billion dollars worth. And I was just looking at those figures because I was trying to understand that. So I got on to Stats Canada. I said, can you get me the figures on our imports of oil last year? And so they kindly sent me out the numbers here. So I'm just looking at the number, because the interesting one is all of the crude oil that we import. So here's the number. It's for 2019. No one else has seen these figures, I don't think. I don't think people bother to ask, because it has to do with facts on energy which aren't in demand. $18.6 billion worth of crude oil was imported to Canada in 2019, Jim. There's your number.
So, although some of that oil money would be going to the United States if it was produced in Canada, because they own oil companies here, still both provincial and federal governments get an awful lot of money from oil royalties. How much would that help, us reduce what's going to be a massive deficit?
Oh, without a question. I think any economist would tell you this. There's no single factor more than our energy that helps us to balance our books or ensure our trade is tending towards balance, that generates jobs and revenues through the whole economy. There's nothing more, and not just energy in general, specifically crude oil, because electricity sales are it feels good in BC. We get a bit from the Columbia River Treaty, which is fabulous. It's been there for a long time. But the same is true even in Quebec. It doesn't bring in that much. It's crude oil that does create immense benefits. It's bigger than the auto industry, which is a huge industry. And unlike the auto industry, it doesn't rely on importing foreign-made engines and parts that we bolt together into a car. We're kind of doing the talk-to-toy thing here. We're We're not making the parts in all cases. And so that's so different from oil, because oil, we do it all. Like no one, yeah, I mean, we might have some foreign expertise. We need foreign capital because we're a small country. We don't have enough capital. We're not like an old empire country like England that's got oodles of money. We need to get foreign investors if we're going to do anything here. That's just how it works when you're a little country like us, population-wise. And so, once we get the money and the tools and the right people in place, all that stuff happens in Canada. All of it. We also manufacture an enormous amount of the equipment, the stuff required to do these very technologically intensive oil extraction and processing, jobs. And then we market it, we make sure the environment is protected. Those are jobs, more revenue. Nothing matches it. And so when you have these politicians who just sort of carelessly, not even running for office, they're just trying to do as much damage as possible to public understanding before they take their pension and go and live to a ripe old age on a nice, warm Gulf Island. The truth is that the Canadian way of life, for better or worse, does depend right now on our ability to get our goods to market, and especially our crude oil to market.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlan, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. I'm speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, are the elected governments in Ottawa and Victoria against democracy? And I'm talking about secret deals with unelected chiefs. Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure that if you said to the ministers from Victoria and Ottawa that, we have a suspicion that your principles of democracy are perhaps not unalloyed by other feelings, they might say, no, I am completely in favor of democracy. There's nothing that would shake my confidence in wanting everyone who lives in Canada to enjoy the benefits of living in a democratic state. I'm sure you would hear that. But at the same time, here we have a situation right now developing, affecting a very small nation, First Nation, the Wet'suwet'en of the Bulkley Valley and surrounding areas. Half a dozen communities that they live in, villages, one larger one. The others are really small. In some cases, 100, a couple hundred. And in total, no more than 5,000 people in this First Nation, yet a very significant one with an ancient and proud history and strategically located. And probably the reason we're talking about it is because of that location. It's on, right now, a pipeline route, but there's been mining, Huckleberry Mine, closed down. It's up there. A lot of forestry. The world's biggest sawmills in Houston, which is right smack dab in the middle of the Wet'suwet'en country. And so we have, over many years, back to the Supreme Court Delgamuth decision, a historical trend towards some degree of rights and title, or the implementation of rights and title, full stop, that will allow the rights of the Wet'suwet'en people to be fully experienced, because the last century or two have not been kind, as any other First Nation suffer terribly, whether it's disease or deprivation of access to resources. There's a lot of historical wrongs to right, and that work I think has been underway for some time, but it's far from complete. So there's significant issues here. But where it gets interesting with the Wet'suwet'en, unlike say the Nisga'a, Chilcotin, where we've seen tremendous progress in treaties that have allowed the aspirations of the local people to be exhibited through processes that are open to scrutiny and supported by the First Nations themselves. What we've seen in the Wet'suwet'en situation right now, and it's continuing to develop, is a rather bizarre situation where the elected councils, who have been the ones delivering services to residents, the ones talking about you hear this over and over again, we want a path out of poverty because, they're, geographically speaking, it's a remote location and there's not a lot of economic options. And so the few that do come along, I think we've seen the elected chiefs say, we'd like to get a piece of that. And that's what they've done. They've got benefits agreements with companies, not just in their own village boundaries, but outside in the land area that they call their traditional territory. Now, what the federal government has done with the provincial government of British Columbia is they've, rather than work with the elected First Nations that have been accomplishing all this, they've decided to throw their lot in with the hereditary chiefs, who are just that. I mean, it's a feudal system. So they, right now, are a couple of days away. On May 14th, there's a plan to sign a memorandum of understanding that will lead to about a year of processes to, at the end of the day, bring about a type of local rights of title governance, not dissimilar in some ways to what the Nisga'a Nationalism's government has up in the Nass River Valley, north of Prince Rupert, it's just celebrated its 20th anniversary of implementation. It's been I think, by and large, a success story for the Nisga'a. And I think a lot of it has come from the authenticity of the process. I was on the scene at the time, and I was covering that story pretty closely. It really inspired a lot of Canadians to do that. It was done on Glenn Clark's watch as Premier. I think it was a great accomplishment for him. If I'm not mistaken, Jean Chrétien was the Prime Minister at the time, and it was a great accomplishment, and there was something to celebrate because it was a hard process. In this case, with Wet'suwet'en, it's a backroom deal. The details of the Memorandum of Understanding haven't been officially released. They were in the media last week, after a couple of months of existing, or over a month. And we began to get a glimmer as people started to see it. They said, well, hold on just a minute. You mean the elected chiefs that the people have put in have no say in it? And the government, astonishingly, has said, that's right. We don't want any elected people tainting this process of government. Only those who call themselves hereditary chiefs. And there are some questions. I mean, this is not the biggest deal, but I think I've certainly heard in my travels, my pretty extensive travels in the Wet'suwet'en country over the last couple of years, I've realized that there's a number of people who hold hereditary offices who not all of their fellow Wet'suwet'en consider them to be the ones who should be in those jobs. So it's not even as if they have this clear, solid mandate. So it seems as if Ottawa and Victoria are just full steam ahead. There's no interest whatsoever in any sort of negotiation or recognition that maybe, just maybe, a majority of Wet'suwet'en members would like to be represented through the process. So that's a state of democracy in 2020 in Canada, which is quite interesting. I wouldn't have predicted that.
Now, didn't the male hereditary chiefs exclude female hereditary chiefs from their group?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's that, too. I mean, there was a group of women who I've interviewed a couple of them. I've talked to as many people as I could from different perspectives, and I felt satisfied that the lineage stories of the authenticity of title holding, and it's a very complicated area. It takes a lifetime to be groomed as a chief. These are, no matter where you stand on different issues, I found that Wet'suwet'en people come together, all of them, around one thing, which is a deep, deep respect for the hereditary system. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you want the hereditary system to govern everything, but that's where it's going now. So yeah, there were 3 women chiefs who were stripped of their titles. No one quite understands why or how or by what authority, so that pipeline opposing chiefs could be installed. Again, very low transparency on this stuff. There's going to be a significant investment by senior levels of government in setting this up. I think one area of confusion is how this fits in with the natural gas pipeline, the CGL, or Coastal GasLink pipeline, that's currently being built there. Now, it's opposed by the hereditary chiefs, most of them, who will be put in charge of that whole area. And by the way, I've heard from some non-Indigenous business owners and residents of the Bulkley Valley who are also pained and confused. Now, I know that governments aren't interested in talking to such people in this day and age, but there is a lot of confusion. People who think they have a title over their farm or their business property, and now no one from these governments has come to talk to them to say what they're talking about. What does it mean when there's a national level of government being created that would suit a national government? What will it mean for people? So there's no interest in our governments in having that discussion. It's just, here you go, suck it up, buttercup. That's basically the attitude towards all citizens, regardless of whether they're Indigenous or not. So it's kind of the elites to the elites, I guess.
Well, obviously, Stewart, the solution is you and I have to trace our roots back far enough that we can find some royal blood and then say that gives us the right to run this country.
Oh, I like that. I got to get back onto what's that genealogy website?
Hereditary.com?
It was like $35 a month or something. I did, even though I learned a lot about my ancestors in the British Isles. My Scottish nature wouldn't allow me to keep paying that much for a monthly subscription, so I let it lapse. But I did learn a lot. Maybe there's some more information I could glean.
What, you're not related to King James or some other Scottish prince? William?
I didn't get that subscription level to find out. Maybe next time.
Next time. That's how we get to rule the world. We're former royals, damn it.
Exactly, yes.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You can find him on Twitter at SJMuir. If you have any questions for Stewart or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. Find us on Twitter at House Street, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.